Hi, Stephanie James here again from the Mott-Warsh Collection and MW Gallery. Let's get back to our conversation with Whitfield Lovell.
So I have to say that I enjoy doing site-specific installations very much. But, you have to be invited and you have to have a budget and help. And the tableau pieces are things that I can make in my studio here. But this was a very special experience. It's called Sanctuary, the Great Dismal Swamp. Next.
Yes.
I was invited by the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art to do an installation, and I chose to do it about the Dismal Swamp, which is an actual swamp land that spans across the border of Virginia and North Carolina. And I believe it was George Washington who named it the Dismal Swamp because the conditions there were so dismal. And for generations, runaway slaves, so-called runaway slaves, hid in the swamps to avoid being recaptured by their owners. And so, next slide.
Mm-hmm.
And so this piece honors them. They were referred to as Maroons.
Maroons, yes.
And the book, Dread, The Great Dismal Swamp, written by, the woman who wrote Gone with the Wind, was about the Dismal Swamp. And Nat Turner was actually one of the slaves who hid out in the Dismal Swamp.
Yeah.
Next. I got to go and visit the Dismal Swamp and feel the ambiance, and I created there's a lot of water in a swamp, and so I used these buckets and put drawings in the bottoms of them, but they're filled with water. Next.
Now I have to ask, just from a practical, as a practical question and layman's kind of a question, how is it that you have the drawing on wood submerged in water? I'm thinking you're using a fixative of some sorts to stabilize the medium, but that would work even in water?
You see, now that's a very good question, because when you step outside of the box and you try non-conventional materials, you learn a lot of things. And I learned that water is very corrosive. And so each of these drawings were done on wood. They were fixed, and they were also lacquered with what do you call, like a
shellac or
shellac to protect the drawings from the water. But the water managed to seep in to the edges. And one of the things that ended up happening was that the water caused some rust holes to open. So in the basins.
Mhm.
So part of the maintenance of this exhibition was sealing up the rust holes
Hmm.
that occurred, and you'll see in the next slide. Yeah, I think that she doesn't have her water right now because
Oh.
there was a big leak underneath her. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I was so curious in seeing it. I mean, it's a wonderful effect. And again, what you're doing in terms of, tapping into all of the senses in terms of, I would imagine, smells of the mulch itself, the trees that you brought in, having a liquid substance and the idea of submerging these images in water, I mean, carries various meanings and suggests symbolism from a number of perspectives.
Right. Especially hiding out,
Right.
hiding away in order to emancipate yourself.
Mhm.
You're in hiding in this very vast sort of forest swampland.
Mhm.
Next slide.
Mhm.
The trees were slated to be cut down by the Chesapeake government, and so we actually got a lot of help from some local people to transport the trees into the gallery and chain them to the ceiling so that they would stand up. So they're actual trees.
Mm.
And I was very careful to fix the mulch so that it felt as if you were walking through a woodsy area.
Sure.
Some people were coming around flattening it out, to make it safer, and then I sneak back in and kind of, kick it around. and I found these cypress knees. You
Mhm.
see them? They're like I think that's when the roots of the cypress trees grow up from the ground, and then they create new trees. Those
Oh.
were very special and very very hard to find.
Hmm.
Now, this was my centerpiece of the installation because the maroons in the Dismal Swamp acquired um, uh, what do you call provisions from the outside
Mhm.
by chopping down the juniper trees and making shingles, which they sold to the people outside for supplies and food and like pans and dishes and things like that. And also in the center of the Dismal Swamp, there is a huge oval-shaped lake. And so this pool that we built represents that lake. I can't remember the name of the lake, but it's an oval-shaped lake, and I actually went out into the lake with some of the forest rangers, and it is 6 inches, no more than 6 inches deep at any one spot. And this is a huge lake.
6 feet deep. Is it 6 feet or 6 inches?
6 feet.
Feet, yeah.
So you can take a 6-foot pole in the center of the lake, and you can touch the bottom of the what do you call the bottom of the lake?
Yeah.
And the water is filled with tannin from the
trees,
the juniper trees.
Yes.
And so it's very brown. I actually I was gifted a big like soda jug full of Dismal Swamp water, which I have to this day. It's like this murky brown color. Okay, in the pool, I put this these objects, and you can go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Next. These are tableaux, which I won't say. I'll just tell you the titles if I can remember them. This one is called Missouri, and it's a rather large piece.
Mm-hmm.
Next. This is called Train. Mm-hmm. Next. This is called Guide My Heart. Those are 2-man tree saws.
Mm-hmm.
Next. And this is called Epic, which the books on the shelf are called Great Epics in American History. I became fascinated with the image of African American servicemen around that time. The World War I and World War II servicemen. Next.
I think this one's in the collection
Flint.
Institute of
Flint,
Art.
right?
Yeah, it is. Uh-huh.
And these round pieces started with the penny savings bank that Maggie Walker started in Virginia.
In Jackson Ward.
So I called these coins. Next.
Yes.
They are done on round molds, antique molds. Next. And sometimes I put them in these kind of constellations.
Beautiful.
Yes, that's one of the largest constellation pieces I've done. Next. Now, this is a piece that I think the Mott-Warsh Fund owns. And it's a card series, which I started, and I've done, so far I've done 2 card series, one with rectangular cards and one with round cards. So this was actually, these were some of the first card pieces I did, and each image comes with, or each image gets paired with a playing card.
Yeah, both these are in the Mott-Warsh collection.
Mm-hmm. And this is the round card series. So there are 54 cards, 54 drawings, one for each card in the deck. And
This is at the Smithsonian Museum of
African
American History and Culture.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic suite. I haven't seen it in person, but just seeing the images knocked me off my feet. And so, real quickly, though, the symbolism or your interest in cards stems from what? I mean, we know that there's various possible connections and from everything from the social activity to the use of cards for fortune telling and things of that nature, and the mystic elements and symbolism.
And playing cards was a very strong social activity in the Black community. It's something that my family members did. My father's family in particular. Almost like there was a monthly card party where they played bid whisks. And I remember as a very small child being fascinated by the beautiful markings on the faces of the cards. And then sort of contemplating what those symbols evoke and what it does when there are like there's one spade, the ace of spade, and when there are 8 spades on a card, and just like the visual structure of the playing card and the kings, the queens, and the jacks. And so with this series, I'm interested in the pairings that I come up with are not arbitrary. They are all very much thought out in terms of what the symbols might represent with it in juxtaposition with that face. For example, Valentine, the heart, the Valentine tends to add a sort of a sweetness, a loving. It evokes like a romantic suggestion or kindness of the heart. Spades, as we all know, has been a derogatory reference to Black people. And here I decided to put my ace of spades with an image of a man with a cap and gown. So and also diamonds representing diamonds. So there are a lot of narratives that can be read into them, whether you're thinking of them as tarots or just simply card games. And so the next tableau is it's called 13s, and I think you can sort of
One.
read several things into these. This one is called.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I won't describe each one because then I'll have you here all week. But
I'm
that's
loving
called
it,
The
but
13s, which I got from a poem by Maya Angelou. The rope is, absolutely. I don't need to talk about the image of a rope in our
sure.
culture. The next slide. This is, I cannot remember the name of this one, but it's
Let me help you. One of these days.
One of these days.
Yes.
Okay. Next. And this is Dawn to Dawn.
Yes.
And that is dirt. There is an ellipse of dirt, which echoes the circular panel that the two soldiers are on, and it also, the dirt referencing the grave, and then there's the image of the woman with a shovel. So I became very interested in servicemen. Next slide. In terms of, like why and how a young black man would choose to to fight for a country that didn't afford or allow him basic human rights. And so that's been an ongoing theme.
Sure.
Next. This is called North, a reference to the Great Migration.
Sure.
And this is this is called My Precarious Life. That's in Savannah. Next. Oh, this one is called Ardor. Next. At Home and Abroad. That is another piece on my ongoing series of young black servicemen. I believe this is World War I. Next. This is called Beauty Without Regret. And those are bullet shell casings. Next. This is called Black Maybe. Next. Silence. That is a doll's fainting couch. So just to give you an idea of the scale, the woman is sort of life size. Next. This is called You're My Thrill. That's another soldier. And those are bomb casings.
Okay.
Next. And I can't remember the name of this one.
Fancy.
Fancy. Okay. That's a washboard. Juxtaposed very closely to her face. Next. And this is beauté sans souci, which means beauty without a care.
So nice.
And what's that?
No, I just said so nice.
Oh, thank you. Next one. This is called Autour du Monde, and it is obviously 3 World War I soldiers. My grandfather wanted very badly to join the service, and so that he could see the world. It was his dream to visit Africa. And he was rejected. He was from a farm in South Carolina, and he wanted to see the world, and he was rejected because they told him he was too short. And his buddy, who he went to the recruitment office with, was told he was too tall. So my grandfather always told that story, that's why he never got to travel, because he was rejected from the army during World War I. But he did ride the trains from Maine to Florida, like the freight trains.
Okay.
Like a hobo.
Well.
Well, that's what they did. They jumped on trains, and they got off, and they looked for work and shelter, and then they'd get another train. These young men were trying to see something outside of their little farm world that they grew up in. And he was very proud that he had done his bachelor travels the only way that he knew how.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
So this is one of the examples that I like to show in terms of my kin series, which I started looking at photo IDs, next slide, and these kind of photo booth images, which are very different from posed, well-lit studio photographs.
Mm-hmm.
Next. And I was interested in the lighting, and the lighting is harsher and a lot more detail, like facial shadows are picked up by this kind of lighting. And so next. And I also started to look at mugshots, which were actually capturing people at a moment where they were obviously not posing for posterity, but probably being photographed at a very difficult moment. And so I did my kin series, which I think the next slides are.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the first of the kin series, and there are 60 of them. And so I went back and forth from these 3 different types of photographs because I was really wanting to capture a realistic sort of, to capture not only the beauty but the essence of the person and the emotion of the person in the image. And next. I called it the Kin series because as I began to work on them, they started to remind me of family, people that I knew, although I didn't know them. Next.
They're very naturalistic.
Mm-hmm. And the juxtapositions of the objects were something that, you know, for me, that's probably like the most exciting part. And I'll tell you, with this particular one, there's this young boy who looks so youthful and sincere and innocent. Mm-hmm. And I tried different objects, juxtaposing them with him. And for example, I put a bouquet of flowers in front of him, and it kind of made him look almost effeminate. But then when I put the bullets there, it really, it just popped it, you know? And it alluded to so many of the current realities that we have to examine in terms of what being a young Black male is today.
Sure.
And has always been. So I'll just go through the next ones.
Okay.
And if I remember the titles, I'll tell you. Those are pearls.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my grandmother's pearls.
These are graphite?
Yes. No, these are Conte on...
Oh, they're Conte again. Mm-hmm.
And these are the ones that are in profile particularly are from mugshots. Because it's not easy to find images of people in profile from vintage photographs.
Uh-huh.
Next. And as I said, I spend a lot of time deliberating over the objects that I juxtapose. Sometimes I have it figured out when I start, but sometimes I let it come together naturally and I don't force it. You know. I call this one Moral Compass. That is one of those roulette wheels.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Next. This is called Nocturne. And those are real coins. I went to a lot of not trouble, but I mean, I went to great lengths to try and capture the skin texture of like, you know, dark spots and
sure, natural blemishes.
Exactly.
In the skin. You know, even the folds, the creases in her neck, it comes across beautifully in terms of the rendering of that.
Mm-hmm. And this one is part of the collection, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's also in the exhibit.
It's called Old Dambala.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as I said, these images are from, if they're profiles, the chances are that they're from mugshots. But I deliberated for a long time over whether to divulge the fact that they were from mugshots, because I found that the first thing people would think about was, oh, I wonder what that person did wrong. Sure. And so I want to emphasize that these are not judgmental images because they're from mugshots. I'm looking for the beauty and the humanity in these people. And the mugshot photography allows me to get a certain kind of lighting and a certain kind of detail. And just because someone's been arrested doesn't mean they're guilty of anything. So I just want to make that clear.
No, and you've done a wonderful job, because I would forget that these would come from a mugshot just looking at the images themselves. It's because of the elegance and dignity that you give them in your rendering.
Mm-hmm. And in this series, the red, white, and blue, the American flag is something that pops up continually for the same reasons that I was discussing with the Black servicemen, because of the history of Black people in America, and, you know, being a Black American carries a lot of weight with it. Yet and still, this is your country. You know, you are American, but it's
complex, isn't it?
It's a very complex relationship.
Yeah.
Now, this one you can't see, but under her neck and above the flag, it says 1619.
Yes, we know
Which
that.
I had learned when I was doing this that was the first time that Blacks were brought into the continent.
North America, rather.
And now we're calling it, I don't know, they're talking about that aspect of history now. But at that time, I just read it in one of my history books, and was fascinated by that.
Yes.
This is called The Power of Myth.
Mm. Mm.
Around the band, I think. I've done a lot of pieces, and so sometimes I forget the titles, but
You're doing well.
okay. This one has a very long title, which I think very evocative title, and I believe I picked it up from a line in an old French movie. Do you have the title there?
Yes, I do. It is, I assume whatever form I want in whatever place my spirit wishes to be in. No, I'm sorry. It's as a question. I left out something. May I assume whatever form I want in whatever place my spirit wishes to be in?
Right. That was very evocative line. I believe it was from an old Cocteau film. Next. Those are pennies.
Magic. It's called Magic.
Magic, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is called Chave Chauvin, right?
Yes.
Which is Portuguese It's a Brazilian song, which means let it rain, rain, let it rain. And the nails are driven directly into the drawing.
And I'm going to move again quickly through the next 5 from the Ken series.
Mm-hmm. The Island of My Skin.
Mm-hmm.
Dira. I don't remember the name of this one.
Glory in the Flower, maybe?
Okay, Glory in the Flower. Great. And this is called To Make Your False Heart True.
Yes.
I really loved doing that piece for some reason. The angles of his face and the shimmery silver of that flask. It was just very special to work on. Next. I think this might be called Fauna.
Fauna. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And this is called After an Afternoon. Each of the radios has a different recording emanating from it, including musical numbers and radio broadcasts and television shows. Like there's the TV show Beulah with
Oh, yeah.
and this is the dismal this is a photograph of Camp Contraband. And if we move to the next slide, I'll briefly explain that I was invited to Chattanooga to do a piece about anything I wanted. I was given carte blanche, and I learned about the history of the city, the Chattanooga Choo Choo, and it was the birthplace of Bessie Smith, et cetera, et cetera. But then when I heard that there was this place called Camp Contraband, which was a Union encampment where runaway slaves who could make it across the river to this campground were given sanctuary and protected from being recaptured by slave hunters during the Civil War. And so I put 56 discs, and I made a projection of the Tennessee River. And if you go to the next slide, you can see more. It's a large room, and there are a lot of discs, and there's also a recording of a beautiful rendition of Deep River, the spiritual, the traditional spiritual, and that plays in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about crossing the river to campground. Mm-hmm. Oh, and there are also I think you can see as you go through them, there is a pile of dirt which represents the campground, and in that dirt there are objects associated with the period, and the images drawn on the discs are from all ages, rather all time periods, because it's like freedom is something that we never stop striving for. So I wasn't just drawing images of runaway slaves, I was drawing images of Black people. And over there is a piece called Flight, with the suitcases, and next slide. And the man up at the top has all of these keys, and from the suitcases emanate the sounds of birds, which represent birds chirping and singing, which represents freedom and flight.
Mm-hmm.
These slides you can just flip through. Those were some of the artifacts that I sort of excavated.
Yes, I was going to say, it's like, yeah, the objects have been excavated just as the images themselves seem to be excavated from history.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of my more recent works. This was an exhibition last March. I call this Spell Suite, and each piece has its own discrete title, as with the Kin series, but they're much larger. They're about maybe 3 times larger than the kin pieces. Next.
These are in shadow box frames, are they?
Yes.
Not?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I cannot remember the names of them. Would be Spell Suite, number, and then colon. And
yeah, this might be The Heart is Mad.
the what?
The Heart is Mad.
Yes, The Heart is Mad. Yes, they're very poetic. I won't get into the symbolism, but I do collect phrases that I think are evocative and add another layer to the way we read these images.
Yeah, you collect a little bit of everything, it sounds like.
I do. This one is called Muja, which is waves in Arabic. I particularly like the way that the crimpy waves in her hair echoed the
sails.
The sails. and just the idea of the passage, you know.
Mm. Mm.
So this was the installation of the first part of this series. It's an ongoing series.
And this was where again?
The art fair in March. It's called the Armory Show.
Oh, okay.
And that's a broken record. And I love the working with the title of that record. The record set, the title of the record is "Please Believe Me."
Hmm. Hmm.
And here is yet another series that I've begun. I think you can see one of them behind me.
Yes.
I call them the Reds. They're on red paper. I've had this thing about that color for quite some time, and I started these when I was in Italy last winter at the American Academy. The next slide has a sort of a group shot of from the studio. And I plan to frame these all in shadow boxes, and there will be some objects, but not a lot. But they'll be in shadow boxes.
And the medium again?
Conte on
Okay,
red
yeah.
Canson paper.
Huh. Nice. Oh, and that's it. So wow, that was a really great visual treat to see all of those images. I just wish I was seeing them in person for one, and I wish you were here with us in person. But still, I just thank you for sharing all that with us,
Thank you.
especially that recent work. So in the remaining time, or we don't have much remaining time, but I do want to get in a few questions that have come from the public.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, I'm going to pick and choose here. Denise Smith Allen would like me to ask, or she states, I thoroughly enjoyed the display or exhibit and was interested in knowing what motivated the artist to create such a diverse style in capturing his subjects.
Well, I was influenced initially by my introduction to photography as a child, because I worked with my father in his darkroom for many years, and I've been making art. I decided to be an artist when I was 13. And so I've been through a lot of different styles and different like ways of expressing myself, until I found some ways that were mature enough to put out in the public. I was trained. I had a very strong training in drawing and painting at Cooper Union and Maryland Institute and the High School of Music and Art. So hand drawing is always a particular pleasure for me. And so drawing, I think that drawing from the vintage photographs, it provokes the viewer to look a little more closely at the subject matter and contemplate it more.
Whitfield, it just comes to me, I'm just curious, do you do much drawing from life?
I did from time.
Yeah, from sitting subjects and
Yes, I did. I started drawing people when I was, seriously, I started studying art seriously at age 13. And one of the things that I did all the time was I drew pictures of people who come and say, draw me, draw me, draw me, draw me. And it got to the point where it took me about an hour to get a likeness of the person. And so people would line up and get their drawings made, and then they just take it and go, and I'd be sitting there by myself. And so I got a lot of practice working from life. It's very different working from life. And I also had a lot of figure drawing classes. I drew from nude models and I painted from nude models, and I learned how to paint realistically with oils. But then I abandoned oils because, it's my interests were just not so much in the slow drying properties of paint, and more in the direct drawing with dry materials. So yes, I've done a lot from life, but I decided I didn't want to be a portrait artist. I wanted to make images of people that spoke about life and not just capture someone's appearance.
No, and that's so impressive that you decided that you would become an artist at such an early age, but you had wonderful encouragement, it sounds like, as well, from your family.
I also sang. I wrote poetry and short stories, but I realized I couldn't do everything, so I had to choose. And I thought that the art was my stronger leaning.
I see. Okay, I'm going to slip in pick another question. Isaiah Lattimore Balicki, I'm sorry if I'm butchering his name. He asks if he could speak on the importance of keeping his figures achromatic. Is it the aesthetic or the materials that push this decision?
It's the aesthetic for me. And I've already taken you through a number of different periods of my trajectory. But if you saw what I was doing in my early 20s, it was like color, 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 color. And, and then for a while there, they were very like hyper-realistic paintings done from life. And I lost interest in that. And I prefer the the monochromatic approach.
Hmm.
But I love when the objects add color. And I also love the color of the wood, or I love the white of the page, or the tan of a piece of tan paper.
Sure. Yeah. No, because in actuality, the pieces aren't fully monochromatic because of what you add to them.
Mm-hmm.
The objects that you juxtapose to those drawings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that the influence of black and white photography is part of that, drawing me in that direction.
Yeah. Let's see, another question. If you could, what advice would you give your younger self?
I would tell my younger self not to worry so much. I worked hard, and I involved myself in a lot of artistic activities, but I worried a lot. And there were not a lot of role models for me. I had heard of Bearden and Jacob Lawrence, and my mentor was Randy Williams. He taught at the Metropolitan. And aside from that, as a young Black male, I didn't have a lot of examples to say, well, this is something that you can do also. So, there's always that voice in the back of your head saying, am I just, do I really have a chance? Is there any way that I can be taken seriously? And it was, partially, the man upstairs and the me in here that just kept saying, just go forward, just don't worry about it, keep going, And when I met Elizabeth Catlett, I was 24, and she said to me, oh, don't worry, you'll make it.
Reassured.
And Star told me that, and
okay.
I that's to answer your question. Just don't worry so much, but always question and always think about growing, because it's never good enough. It can always be better. There's always a higher plateau to reach. And
No, it sounds like great advice. The worrying that applies to so many, professions or just in general statement of advice to our younger selves, no matter what we're doing.
And you have to deal with rejections and disappointments, but you have to find joy in the act of creating,
Yeah, you spoke about how much you enjoy the process of drawing itself, that is truly enjoyment for you. Yeah. Let's see. I have one other. I don't know. In a sense, you've touched on a lot of this already in your talk, but I do have a question. What's your favorite thing to draw?
What's my favorite thing to draw? You mean if I'm drawing a person, what's the favorite part of drawing?
It's an open-ended question.
Okay.
I don't know for sure what they had in mind, but
Okay. Well, I have to say that drawing eyes are that's very, very enjoyable for me. And hair, anyone who's ever been to art training knows that hand and feet are something you have to really practice with, and so I enjoy that a little less, but still, you know, at this ripe old age, I'm not doing too badly with the hands and feet. So,
yeah.
but yeah, the eyes. I always start out with the eyes.
Okay. Okay. Well, it looks like we are just about out of time, but Whitfield, this has just been absolutely wonderful, and I want to thank you again for taking the time, spending this time with us and talking us through your work and giving us some insight into your work and your process is, you know, really fascinating. I do hope that if you happen to find yourself in Flint, if we ever get out of this present moment and you can travel again, especially if you happen to find yourself in Flint before January 23rd when this exhibit ends, I hope you will consider visiting the exhibit and seeing the Mott-Warsh Collection, but also just visiting the great city of Flint.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to also encourage our viewing audience to please visit the exhibit Examining Identity Construction, Selections from the Mott-Warsh Collection, which you can see either in person at MW Gallery in downtown Flint, or you can access it virtually on our website. And we'll have our website address posted. It's m-wc.org. So anything else you want to say in closing, Whitfield?
Well, I enjoyed our talk, and you know, it's interesting to hear what sort of things other people want to know, because, you know, I'm isolated in the studio and doing what I do, and you know, it's nice to be able to talk through and communicate verbally about what I'm doing. So thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure. All right. Well, you continue to take care and we'll talk soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.